Hey everyone, and welcome back to AI Paper Podcast. Today we are diving into a paper that has really been making waves in the AI community.
Yeah, it's definitely causing a stir.
It's called LLMs Can Easily Learn to Reason from Demonstrations. Structure, not content, is what matters.
Catchy title, right?
It really rolls off the tongue.
But you know what? It really does get to the heart of what this paper is all about.
So before we get too deep into it, let's just quickly remind everyone what we're doing here.
Sure. So for those who are new to the show, AI Paper Podcasts is all about breaking down the latest and greatest in AI research, making it accessible and, dare I say, enjoyable for everyone.
Exactly. We're taking those dense academic papers and turning them into something you can listen to on your commute or while you're, folding laundry.
Multitasking at its finest.
And for this particular deep dive, we've got excerpts from the paper itself so we can really get into the nitty-gritty details.
We're going to see how these LLMs, these large language models, can learn to think deeply and solve challenging problems and what truly makes them tick.
All right, so let's unpack this fascinating paper. It dives into how large language models can be taught to reason effectively using a technique called long chain of thought, or Long CoT.
Right. And this long CoT, it involves like reflection, backtracking, self-validation steps, all those things that make us, good thinkers.
So it's not just about spitting out an answer, it's about showing your work, essentially.
Exactly. It's about the journey, not just the destination.
I like that. So for our short-form viewers, let's give them the TLDR right off the bat. What's the big takeaway here?
Okay, so in a nutshell, this paper unveils a surprisingly efficient way to teach LLMs how to reason using this long chain of thought.
Efficient. Okay, I'm intrigued. Spill the beans.
They found that by fine-tuning these models on just 17,000 samples, they achieved performance comparable to proprietary models like OpenAI's GPT-4.
Hold on, 17,000 samples. That's like a drop in the ocean compared to the data sets we usually see for these massive models.
Right. It's tiny. And it gets even better. This GPT-4 we're talking about, it's been trained on a massive undisclosed data set. I mean, who knows how much data they've poured into that thing?
So we're talking about David versus Goliath here, and David is holding his own with a fraction of the resources.
Absolutely. And here's the really interesting part. The researchers discovered that the structure of the reasoning process is way more important than the specific content within each step.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Structure over content. What does that even mean in the context of AI?
Think of it like learning to bake a cake. Sure, the ingredients matter, but the order in which you add them, the steps you take, those are crucial for a successful outcome.
Okay, I can get behind that analogy. So you're saying it's not just about knowing the facts, but about knowing how to connect them in a logical way.
You got it. And they actually tested this idea in a couple of really clever ways.
Lay it on me, I'm all ears.
First, they went wild with content perturbation. They started feeding the model incorrect answers, randomly changing numbers in math problems, and even deleting those keywords that usually signal reasoning, like therefore or however.
Wait, so they were intentionally messing with the training data? I'd think that would just confuse the model.
You'd think so, right? But here's the kicker. The model's performance was surprisingly robust. Like, even when they randomized 50% of the numbers in these math problems, the accuracy only dropped by a tiny 3.3% on this really hard benchmark called AMY 2024.
Wow, so it's like the model was able to see through the noise and still pick up on the underlying patterns of reasoning.
Exactly. It wasn't just memorizing the content, it was learning something deeper.
So maybe those reasoning keywords aren't as important as we thought.
Maybe not. Now, the second way they tested this structure over content idea was by messing with the structure of the reasoning process itself, like shuffling the order of the steps, deleting some entirely, and even inserting random steps from other problems.
Okay, now that just sounds mean. It's like giving someone a puzzle, but juggling up all the pieces.
Right, but it's for science. And as you might expect, the model really struggled when that logical flow was disrupted. Even shuffling the steps by a little bit, like 33%, caused big performance drops.
So it's super sensitive to the order and the connections between those steps.
Totally. It's like the difference between knowing individual words and being able to string them together into a coherent sentence.
Makes sense. So it's not just about understanding the individual concepts, but about being able to chain them together in a logical sequence? That's a pretty profound insight.
Right, and this has huge implications for how we train these powerful LLMs.
Okay, so let's talk training. How do they actually go about teaching these models to reason in this long CoT way?
Well, they tested two main approaches. One was supervised fine-tuning, or SFT, which is pretty standard.
SFT. Okay, we've heard of that one before, but I'm guessing they didn't stop there.
Nope, they also tried something called low-rank adaptation, or LoRA for short.
LoRA. That's the new kid on the block, right? Everyone's talking about it.
It's all the rage, and for good reason. It's all about efficiency. Instead of updating all the parameters of a massive LLM, LoRA just focuses on fine-tuning a smaller subset of them.
So it's like a laser-focused upgrade. targeting the parts of the model that are most relevant for this long CoT reasoning.
Exactly. Less computational heavy lifting, but you can still get amazing results.
Okay, I'm liking the sound of this, especially for those of us who don't have access to Google-sized computing resources.
Right. And the results speak for themselves. Remember how we talked about them achieving great performance with only 17,000 samples? Well, most of those results are actually achieved using LoRa.
No way. So they were able to get comparable or even better performance than full parameter SFT with a fraction of the resources.
It really challenges the way we think about LLM training. And here's another fun fact. A model trained with LoRa using only 7,000 samples did almost as well as one trained on 17,000.
That's incredible. Talk about efficiency. I can see why this paper is making such a splash.
It's a real game changer. But before we get too carried away with the hype, let's take a closer look at some of the other studies they did. They call them ablation studies.
Ablation studies. Sounds a bit intense.
It's not as scary as it sounds. It's basically a way of testing different parts of the model to see how they contribute to the overall performance.
Okay, so like a dive into the deep dive.
Exactly. So one thing they looked at was catastrophic forgetting. This is where a model gets so good at one task that it starts to forget how to do other things.
Oh yeah, we've seen that happen before. It's like the model becomes a one-trick pony.
Right. But thankfully, they found that the Long CoT fine-tuned models didn't have this problem. They were still able to perform well on tasks that didn't involve reasoning.
Joe, that's a relief. We want our models to be well-rounded students, not just specialists.
Absolutely. And they also tested how well this Long CoT fine-tuning worked across different student models, different sizes and architectures.
So it's not just limited to that one QQuan model they used in the main experiments.
Nope. They found that most of the models they tested showed significant improvement after Long CoT fine-tuning. So this approach seems to have pretty broad applicability.
That's exciting news for the whole field. It means we're not limited to just one specific type of LLM.
And they didn't stop there. They also compared Long CoT fine-tuning to another technique called best-of-n sampling. This is where you run the model multiple times and pick the best output.
Interesting. So it's like trying to get the best answer by brute force.
Yeah, kind of. And surprisingly, the Long CoT fine-tuned model did just as well as picking the best response from like 2 to 16 samples.
Wow. So it's like training the model to be smart is just as effective as running the basic model over and over again and hoping for the best.
Pretty much. And finally, they did a head-to-head comparison between fine-tuning on Long CoT and short CoT, which is like Long CoT but with fewer reasoning steps.
Okay, I'm sensing a pattern here. I'm guessing Long CoT came out on top.
You know it. The models trained on Long CoT used more reasoning keywords. They produced longer, more detailed responses for complex problems, and they just performed better overall.
So the more detailed and structured the reasoning, the better the results. Makes sense to me.
Right. It's all about teaching these models to think deeply and systematically. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to quickly touch on the different benchmarks they used.
Benchmarks, you mean like AMY 2024, GSM-8K, Human Evil, all those?
Exactly. Those are all standardized data sets that are designed to test different aspects of reasoning and problem solving. Like AMY is a really tough math competition for high school students.
Okay, so they're not just testing these models on easy stuff.
Definitely not. They're throwing them in the deep end and seeing if they can swim.
And by using all these different benchmarks, they were able to show that this long CoT approach is pretty versatile. It's not just good at one specific type of problem.
Exactly. It's a general purpose reasoning machine.
I'm really starting to see the potential here, but I'm also curious about the real-world applications of this technology. Like, how can we actually use these long CoT-powered models to solve problems that matter?
Well, that's a great question, and it's something we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive, so stay tuned.
I can't wait. This is getting good.
It is, isn't it?
All right, everyone, be sure to come back for part 2, where we'll be diving into the exciting world of real-world applications for long CoT.
We'll see you then.
Bye for now.
See ya. Welcome back, everyone, for part 2 of our deep dive into the fascinating world of long chain of thought reasoning.
I'm still geeking out over that LoRa stuff from last time.
I know, right? Such a game changer.
But I'm sure our viewers are eager to see how this long CoT actually plays out in practice.
Yeah, let's get concrete.
Give us the juicy details.
All right, so let's say we throw a super tricky math problem at the long CoT model, like the kind that would make even a seasoned mathematician sweat a little.
Ooh, I'm picturing a digital whiteboard with equations and diagrams swirling around as the model's like frantically working through the problem.
Yeah, kind of like that. What's cool is that the model's long CoT response, it actually mirrors the way a human expert might tackle the problem.
So it's not just blindly plugging in formulas or anything.
No, it's breaking down the problem, figuring out the constraints, and then strategically exploring different approaches.
So it's like actually engaging in strategic problem solving.
It really is, and here's where it gets even more interesting. The model doesn't always get it right on the first try.
Oh, so it's not perfect.
No model is. But the key is that it's been trained to recognize and correct those errors.
So it's like it has a built-in debugger for its own thought process?
Exactly. It'll use phrases like, wait a minute, or let me double check that, to signal when it's going back and revising its earlier steps.
That's so cool. It's like we can peek inside the model's brain and see how it's thinking.
Right. It makes the whole reasoning process transparent, and it also highlights an important point. It's not about getting every single problem right. It's about developing a robust and adaptable reasoning process.
So it's okay to make mistakes as long as you learn from them.
Precisely. It's the journey, not just the destination.
I love that analogy. It's so true, even outside of AI.
Right. This whole Long CoT approach, it has huge implications for how we learn and teach in general.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine if we could provide students with personalized step-by-step guidance as they're working through complex problems.
It would be like having an AI tutor that can not only give you the answer, but also explain the thought process behind it.
Okay, now my mind is racing with possibilities. What other real-world applications can you see for this Long CoT technology?
Well, for starters, think about software development. Imagine a model that can not only write code, but also explain its reasoning, flag potential bugs, and even suggest improvements.
Oh man, that would be a developer's dream. No more late nights trying to figure out why your code is broken.
And the potential for scientific research is huge too. These Long CoT models could help scientists analyze complex data, generate hypotheses, and even design experiments.
It's like AI-powered science. We could be on the verge of some major breakthroughs.
It's definitely an exciting time to be working in this field, but of course we need to be realistic too. This technology is still in its early stages.
Right, there's always a hype cycle with these things.
Exactly. We need to temper our enthusiasm with a healthy dose of caution. There's still a lot of work to be done.
Okay, so let's talk about the challenges. What are some of the things that keep AI researchers up at night when it comes to Long CoT?
Well, one major hurdle is the creation of truly effective training datasets. Remember, it's not just about giving the model the right answers, it's about demonstrating the entire reasoning process.
So it's like creating a super detailed roadmap, showing the model not just where to go, but how to get there.
Exactly. And that's incredibly challenging. It requires a deep understanding of the problem domain, the ability to break down complex tasks, and a knack for anticipating potential errors and alternative approaches.
Wow, that's a tall order. It's like you need to be part subject matter expert, part logician, part mind reader.
Haha, yeah, something like that. And then there's the issue of scalability. Creating these data sets manually is incredibly time-consuming.
Right, it's not like we have an army of AI experts just sitting around writing out reasoning chains all day.
We wish. So we need to find more efficient methods for generating these data sets, maybe by leveraging existing knowledge bases, or even using other AI models to help us.
Ooh, using AI to train AI. I like it. It's like a self-bootstrapping process.
It is, and it could be the key to scaling up this Long CoT technology.
Okay, so we've talked about data, but what about evaluation? How do we actually measure the quality and consistency of this Long CoT reasoning?
That's another big challenge. Accuracy alone isn't enough. We need ways to assess the logic and reasoning behind the model's decisions.
So it's not just about whether the answer is right, it's about how the model got there.
Exactly. We need to be able to peer into the black box and make sure the reasoning is sound.
It's like being a teacher and not just grading the final answer, but looking at the student's work to see how they arrived at their solution.
Perfect analogy. And luckily, there's a lot of exciting research happening in this area. People are developing new metrics and evaluation frameworks specifically for Long CoT.
That's great to hear. It sounds like we're making good progress, but there's still a lot to figure out.
Absolutely. Long CoT is a powerful tool, but we need to use it wisely.
Okay, so before we wrap up this part, I'm curious about something. You mentioned that they got great results with just 17,000 training samples. But what exactly does a training sample look like in the context of Long CoT?
Good question. So basically, a training sample consists of a problem, a chain of reasoning steps that lead to the solution and the final answer. It's like a complete demonstration of the thought process.
So it's like giving the model a step-by-step guide on how to solve the problem.
Exactly. And these samples, they can come from various sources like textbooks, problem sets, even online forums.
So it's like collecting all the best examples of human reasoning and feeding them to the AI.
Yeah, kind of. But there's a catch. It's not enough to just throw any old reasoning chain at the model. The samples need to be high quality.
What do you mean by high quality?
Well, the reasoning needs to be accurate, logical, and free from biases. It's like peer review in science. We need to make sure the reasoning holds up to scrutiny.
So it's not just about quality, it's about quality too.
Absolutely. And finding enough high-quality training data, that's one of the biggest challenges in this field.
I can imagine. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Right. But luckily, there are researchers working on ways to automate this process, maybe by using AI to generate those reasoning chains.
Creating AI is like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It is pretty wild, but it could be the solution we need.
Okay, so we've talked about what goes into these training samples, but what about the format? Are they just like text documents, or is there a specific structure they need to follow?
They are usually text, but there is a specific structure. The problem statement comes first, then a series of clearly delineated reasoning steps, and finally, the solution.
So it's almost like writing a mini essay, but with a very logical flow?
Yeah, exactly. And that structure, it helps the model learn the importance of clear step-by-step reasoning.
Makes sense. But how do we make sure that these training samples are actually good? Is there some kind of quality control process?
Yeah, that's a crucial part. We need to have mechanisms in place to ensure that the reasoning is accurate and unbiased. It's like having a team of editors reviewing those mini essays.
So it's like a great new field is emerging around the creation and curation of these Long CoT datasets.
Absolutely. It's a very exciting time to be involved in this research.
Well, I'm definitely hooked. I can't wait to see what the future holds for Long CoT.
Me too. It has the potential to revolutionize the way we think and solve problems.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this part of our deep dive.
Agreed. But don't worry, we'll be back for part 3 where we'll be looking at some concrete examples of what these Long CoT responses actually look like.
That's right. We'll be getting up close and personal with those reasoning chains.
So stay tuned.
All right, so we're back for the final part of our long chain of thought deep dive.
I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
I know, right? But we've got to wrap it up sometime.
True. So where do we want to go from here?
Well, we've talked a lot about the potential of Long CoT, but I think it's important to also acknowledge the potential risks.
Right. Got to keep it real.
Exactly. So one thing that I'm particularly concerned about is bias.
Yeah, that's a big one.
We know that AI models can inherit biases from their training data.
And with Long CoT, we're essentially teaching them to think like us. So yeah, if our thinking is biased, the model's thinking will be biased too.
It's like giving them a blueprint for how to be prejudiced.
Oof, that's a bit heavy, but you're not wrong. So how do we address that?
Well, I think it starts with the training data. We need to make sure it's diverse, representative, and free from harmful biases.
It's like a balanced diet for the AI.
Yeah. Lots of fruits and vegetables and no junk food.
But it's not just about the data itself. It's also about the structure of the reasoning process.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, if we're not careful, we could bake biases into the very way we teach these models to think.
Oh, I see. So it's not just what we teach them, but how we teach them.
Exactly. We need to be mindful of the assumptions we're making and make sure the reasoning process is fair and equitable.
It sounds like we need a whole new set of guidelines for ethical AI development.
We definitely do. This is uncharted territory.
Okay, so we've talked about bias. What about misuse? Could someone use Long CoT to create AI systems that are deceptive, manipulative, or even dangerous?
That's definitely a possibility, and it highlights the need for responsible AI development.
Right. We need to make sure this powerful technology doesn't fall into the wrong hands.
Absolutely. We need safeguards and ethical guidelines to prevent misuse.
Okay, so those are some of the ethical considerations. What about technical challenges? What are some of the things that are still holding Long CoT back?
Well, as we discussed earlier, creating those high-quality Long CoT datasets is a huge bottleneck.
It's like trying to write a detailed instruction manual for every possible scenario.
It's a massive undertaking, so we need to find ways to automate this process or leverage existing knowledge bases.
Right, like using AI to train AI.
Exactly. It's a bit meta, but it could be the key to unlocking the full potential of Long CoT.
I'm really digging this idea of AI building AI.
It's pretty mind-blowing. And then that's the challenge of evaluation. How do we actually measure the quality of Long CoT reasoning?
Yeah, accuracy alone doesn't tell the whole story.
Right. We need to go beyond just checking if the answer is right. We need to understand the thought process behind it.
So it's like we're not just grading the final exam. We're looking at the students' work to see how they arrived at their answer.
Perfect analogy. And luckily, there's a lot of research happening in this area, developing new metrics and evaluation frameworks specifically for Long CoT.
That's reassuring to hear. It sounds like we're on the right track.
I think so. There's still a long way to go, but the future of Long CoT is definitely bright.
I'm excited to see where this technology takes us.
Me too. It has the potential to revolutionize so many different fields.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
I guess all good things must come to an end.
But this is just the beginning of our exploration of Long CoT.
Right. There's so much more to learn and discover.
So to all our listeners out there, keep those minds curious and stay tuned for more AI Paper podcasts.
And don't be afraid to dive into the research yourself. There's a whole world of exciting discoveries waiting to be made.
That's right. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights with you.
Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.
Bye, everyone.